Will the Maple Leafs make sweeping changes this offseason? Can the Canucks carry over their regular season success against the Oilers into the playoffs? And who will be the next head coach of the Ottawa Senators? Hey, everyone. Welcome into Off the Post. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Toronto Sun sports columnist Steve Simmons, Canucks reporter for the Vancouver Sun and the Province, Patrick Johnston, and Postmedia hockey columnist Bruce Garrioch. And guys, for the seventh time in the last 8 seasons, the Maple Leafs are one and done, losing to the Boston Bruins in 7 games. Steve, the focus has officially shifted towards the offseason. It does seem like changes are on the horizon, but how deep-rooted should the turnover be, in your opinion?
Well, if you listen to fans, everyone has to go. But fans don't often make a whole lot of sense when you look at the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is the Leafs have a bunch of guys signed for next season with no movement clauses, which puts them in the same position they've been in for too many years, where there's too much money on the top guys who don't perform come playoff time and not enough money to build the rest of the roster. So if you move out Brendan Shanahan as team president, for example, does that make your team better? I don't know. If you move out the general manager, Brad Treliving, does that make your team better? I don't know. If you move out the coach. So you can talk all you want about sweeping changes. You need a plan. You need a plan on how this group, which at one time was geared toward winning a Stanley Cup, well, that thing has gone by the wayside. It's not winning a Stanley Cup anymore. It's winning a round. This group can't win a round. How are they going to win a Stanley Cup, and who's going to bring it to them?
Well, and I mean, that's what they have to decide, right? I just think, you have to read the tea leaves in these situations sometime, Steve. And Brendan Shanahan has had 10 years to put the Shanahan plan in place. And I was driving home from my cottage yesterday, and I happened to turn on the Fan 590, and they were calling it the Shana scam. And they basically wanted the 4 people they wanted gone are Shanahan, Keefe, Marner, and Morgan Riley. And I think they are probably going to get their wishes with Shanahan and Keefe. The on ice changes, though, I think you're right, Steve. They're going to be more difficult when you have guys with no move clauses and we've seen this in Ottawa, where they can control Patrick where they go, and ultimately what you get in return too.
That's the biggest thing in the end, is what you're able to get back. Now, you look back 10 years, what happened here? This was a team that hit the wall. New management came in. They did make a big stink about the fact they had all these no-move clauses, but the truth is the Canucks did move on from a lot of those contracts. They found a way to do it. Now, it wasn't the most optimal. It certainly wasn't the most ideal trades. You can think, for instance, to the Ryan Kessler deal, where it basically said, I want to go to Anaheim, and that's it. You're in that kind of world. But yeah, you look at every single top forward on this team has a no move clause. Obviously, Riley has a no move clause. TJ Brody's contract coming up, so there's a player that you're probably going to move on from. You can make some change on the back end, but overall, what you've been doing hasn't been working. You've gotten so far, and at some point, you need to change up the chemistry, or at very least the message. And I think that's clearly why Sheldon Keefe's probably going to be going out the door as well.
Well, the strange thing about firing Sheldon Keefe, if it's today, if it's tomorrow, if it's the next day, this would be, in my mind, firing him after the 3 best games he's ever coached as a Leaf. So here he is, just finding his way with this group, which has been a difficult group to coach. And they have 1 goal against in 3 consecutive games, with man for man, maybe the worst defense in the NHL. And so that's good coaching. So you can move on from Sheldon, bring in somebody now who's better, that can make this team better, that someone upstairs can make the team better. Like, that's the problem with saying, oh, I'm going to replace this guy. It's not a question of, am I going to replace him? It's who am I going to replace him with, and how much better is he than the guy who was there before him?
Bringing Craig Berube, and he's still working with the same defense corps.
What is the thing with Craig Berube? I don't get it. I don't get why his name comes up for. If I'm looking for a coach, let me just say, sorry. If I'm looking for a coach right now, there's no question my first phone call is to Joel Quenneville. He's the best coach available.
Here's my thing. Careful what you wish for, because you have made the playoffs 5 straight years under this guy. And to have a chance, you got to get there first. And I'm like you, Steve. I don't think it's coaching. I think it's that he's probably going to get fired because it's time for change, But, I've watched here in Ottawa, you can't win without a goalie. They should just call it goaltending. So anyway, we're carrying on too long. We can't solve this. We can't solve the Leafs issues in 4 minutes.
Yeah, well, they've been trying for many years, so this might be the longest video of all time if we do ultimately want to figure out those issues. But unfortunately for Canadian hockey fans, we are down to just 2 Canadian teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and go figure, Patrick, they're playing in the second round as the Canucks will take on the Oilers, and the Canucks did go 4-0 against Edmonton in the regular season. Do they have the secret sauce to beat McDavid and company?
Well, you look at that series, the season series, and what a story of really the Edmonton Oilers this season it is more than anything. Obviously, the Canucks played them the first 2 games of the year, blew them out 8-1 on opening night. The Oilers looked like they'd never played hockey before, basically, that night. The next night, Oilers had tons of possession in their home opener, but the Canucks basically rope-a-dope their way to another surprising win. The reeling Oilers, I think it was one of the last games Jay Woodcroft coached was in Vancouver in early November. Canucks won again. And then there was a late season matchup where Connor McDavid didn't play. And the Canucks were very solid. And I think in that game, we saw a lot of where the Canucks are now at, which is that they are a very strong defensive team. And that's kind of where it's all going to come down to. How strong can their defense be against this high-powered offense in Edmonton? And do they have enough? They have certainly the talent to counterpunch. Didn't show enough of that in beating the Predators, which was a statement in itself, and how in the end the Predators couldn't quite match up with that. It's going to come down to basically, can the Canucks defend well enough 5-on-5, and how are things going to shake up on the power play? Rick Tocchet's already talked about this. My team cannot take tons and tons of penalties because we are going to lose if that happens.
The answer, Patrick, is no, 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 and no. If there's an 8-1 game in this series coming up, it's going to be Edmonton 8 and Vancouver 1. These teams are not of the same level anymore. They may have been standings-wise or whatever. They're just not. You watch McDavid now. He's on his game, and Draisaitl's on his game, and Hyman's on his game, and Bouchard is on his game, and the goalie's on his game. And you watch Vancouver, and they barely squeaked by Nashville, And she loves you, yeah, and goal. And, they're going to light him up, I think. I think this could be a 4 or 5 game series.
I just think you have to look. My concern for the Canucks here is that you have to look at the Oilers' power play in that first series against the Kings. They went 9 for 20. And Leon Draisaitl appears to have taken his game to another level. And Zach Hyman has been excellent. You don't only have to worry about McDavid, and Stuart Skinner has some playoff experience now. I think it's unfortunate that 2 Canadian teams are meeting at this stage because one of them is going to eliminate the other one. But I do think that the Canucks have their hands full with this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough series for sure for Vancouver. Lastly, Bruce, you wrote this weekend about the Senators' search for a new head coach coming to a head. Where do things stand on that front?
Well, I think we're closing in on a conclusion to this, and I think we're going to see it here in the coming days. My expectation, my belief is that Travis Green has emerged as the front runner of a group that includes Dean Evison, Craig Berube, who I'm almost worried to say his name now, and Todd McClellan. And I think people are going to be surprised by this. But I think, Patrick, you know Travis Green better than me as a coach, but clearly he did something in these interviews to impress his team. And I think where Berube is he's waiting to see what else comes up. But, Travis, you know way more, or pardon me, Patrick, you know way more about Travis as a head coach than I do.
Yeah, Travis would be an interesting choice there for sure. A coach that I think on the whole is quite player-centered, very kind of forth in that Rick Tocchet mold, trying to kind of play almost this kind of the friendly PE teacher, kind of being on the player side, keep them thinking positive, moving forward, and then trying to push them in a direction that he thinks they can get to. I think that was, in the end, that was the biggest lesson you would hope he took out of Vancouver, was how to get a player, what else can you do? At the end of the day, in his final season here, I think he went too far towards being obsessed with sort of defense and taking his players away from what they were focused on. He's a guy that likes to play offense. He's a guy that likes to create chances in front of the net. Which is essentially what everybody tries to do, I guess. But he does want to have his players playing an up-tempo game, and certainly with the personnel that Ottawa has, I think he could be a very interesting fit.
I covered Travis as a player in Toronto, and of all the players I've probably ever covered, he may have been the last guy I ever would have thought would have been a coach. He just didn't seem to have any of that in him at all. And then he went to the minors, and all I kept hearing from people I trust a lot in hockey, Travis Green is emerging as one of the great young coaches in the game. He's heading to the NHL. He's going to get to the NHL. He went to Vancouver. He's been in Jersey now as an interim. Everything I've heard about him from people I trust in the business, they speak very highly of him as a coach. I'm still going back to the guy goofing around in the back of the dressing room. But having said that, I think that Ottawa needs somebody to come in and build some structure around that group. And yes, up-tempo matters, but structure up-tempo, because they have talent, but they don't have a clue how to play. And they're going to have to learn how to play after years and too many years of looking like they're going to be the next something and turning out to be the next nothing.
Didn't Travis Green, when you've tweaked me here, I mean, when he was a player with the Leafs, people here hated him. In the Battle of Ontario, him and Darcy Tucker and Ty Domi. But didn't he participate in some World Series of poker when he was a player? Right?
Yeah, he's a big time poker player, and he's a fascinating guy, really bright guy, a guy that came out of junior as a big scorer, went to Long Island. Al Arbor basically said, you need to become a third line center in the old school kind of checking way. He figured that out. And he played 970 games in the NHL, right? Here's a guy who learned how to play and learned how to be a good teammate and learned how to be useful no matter where he was. And, as a coach, he's had that as well. He went to Portland in the WHL, worked under Mike Johnston, won a championship there. Ended up in Utica, the Canucks' then AHL team, impressed a lot there. He's been very adaptable. And Steve, you're absolutely right. Structure in the end is what sunk him in Vancouver. He tried to bring that in probably too late. I think in the end, if he's going to succeed in Ottawa, it's about finding the right staff to work with, the guys that are going to be able to teach those details beyond just him being, the top end. Here's the philosophy. Here's the sort of X's. Here's how I want the players to believe and how I want the players to think. The overall structure of it is absolutely going to be a priority, and he'll need to have a good staff for that.
And you've hit on a point that doesn't get brought up nearly often enough. Who are you hiring? Who are going to be your assistants? Who's teaching power play? Who's doing penalty kill? Who's teaching your defense? Who's doing all the things that matter? Because there's so much coaching in hockey today, as opposed to years and years ago, where there was one guy and maybe an assistant on the bench. There is so much coaching today. Maybe the game's a touch overcoached, but you need your detailed people. And so, the question, if I was in an interview with any head coach, is who's your staff? I want to know who your staff is, because your staff is going to make or break you.
Well, last point, interesting you say that, because nobody is better on a whiteboard than Guy Boucher. Is there anybody more entertaining to watch than Guy Boucher on a whiteboard? They call it the Guy Show.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing some changes here, and coaching musical chairs just getting started for the NHL. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Steve Simmons, Patrick Johnston, and Bruce Garrioch, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next.